Let's talk about the business of the day as it relates to theater with your hosts, Darnell Radford and Mitch Weiss. This is The Business of Theater, a working title. Just keep you where you are, and then you have to figure it all out once you go.
What's the name of this show?
Mitch, I know we're trying to figure out a replacement, but we are not calling the podcast The Business of Theater. In Comes Company.
I just love that you entertain us during these things.
I still need to see this revival of Company. I've heard good things. I listened to the London cast recording, and it is on my list.
You want an opinion? I'm one of these mixed. I happen to love the show, having been around to see the original multiple times. I love the idea of what Marion Elliott did with the show, the gender screwing, or however we should say it on a podcast.
Gender bending.
No, it's not quite gender bending. Yeah, it's just adjusting? A reversal. It's just an adjustment.
Not bending. No.
No, it's not gender bending.
Gender reversal?
Perhaps. I think, as much as I did enjoy it, I think she misunderstood the show, the director. I think, and that's my opinion, but I was very disappointed in Act 2. And that's me, but I know people who absolutely adore it, and of course, it won the Tonys and deserved it compared to what it was against.
So remind me, who pays Patti LuPone's salary?
Well, yeah, not who she says, and not who the audience member said. And that's part of the problem. Let's be honest. The person who hands her the check and writes the check is the company manager, right?
Yeah.
Right? So the producer isn't anywhere near close to that. But certainly the audience member paying the ticket, give them back the, their money and just go away. We don't need you.
Well, I definitely think, one thing that is blatantly obvious is, okay, so given the season, this long intermission we are easing out of, like kicking and screaming. We can't we're still kind of in it because we're not in full swing. It just becomes apparent that it's possible that the viewers have not seen all of these productions.
Correct.
So, for to see a production winner, it makes you think, like, is this really as exciting as this audience is leading on? Because everybody hasn't seen all of these shows. Now, I do have friends in the New York area, which I'm happy to say that they have seen every show. One of my friends posted a couple of images of all of the playbills that he had accumulated, and he really got there, but I think he's on the inside too. So, that's a thing, like, we don't always think about.
It's also difficult this year because so many shows opened in 1 month in order to be eligible for the Tonys. And even if you are a Tony voter or a critic, that's exhausting.
Yeah. Yeah. Didn't 18 shows open at the same time?
I think it was 16 shows in April alone.
Okay. Well, in general, I think, I do look forward to the opening number. I always want to see what they do there because it is basically a press release for the industry, the opening number. And It was,
Oh,
you
and
know,
first of all, kudos that she could dance and still at least attempt to sing. I mean, she was singing
yes, Ariana
while
DeBose,
while she was up in the air and being twisted around and falling into
Oscar
people.
winner
Yeah, falling into
Ariana
people's
DeBose.
arms. That was amazing. There were times I went, "Oh no, she's not still singing. How did she do
Yeah,
that?"
yeah.
That was the amazing thing. You know, her energy, her
She gets
vibrancy.
a round of applause
Oh, Darnell, we got to put you
because
on
that was the
stage. We
song.
got to put you on stage.
That was the song. Yes.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that. I thought it was a great opening
I
number,
had trouble keeping
and
track of. It was going show to show to show, and
yeah,
it was so dense with shows that
hmm
I know them all, and I was having trouble saying, "Oh, that's the next one." Oh, wait a minute, did I miss something there? Oh,
I will say that I understood the song that was jabbing about the crowd work. Like, we're coming into the audience,
mm,
you're about to be nervous because you don't want to be a part of this. I get that, but I'm wondering, like, we probably could have seen a couple of other live awards if we didn't have that moment.
well, now you're hitting a sore point. The Tonys, unlike other award shows, it's a community event, and I do understand it's nationwide.
Hmm.
But then again, it is the lowest rated television special every year of all
Yeah.
television specials because it's New York and LA and a handful of people in between. So
Mm.
since it is for, by, and of the community, whether you're a nerd, that makes you part of the community.
Yeah.
Then these things, telling Natasha Katz, who I went to college with, by the way, that her Tony Award for lighting design of MJ is not going to make it onto the primetime stage, or
Mm.
Christopher Wheeldon's uh, wonderful
Choreography.
choreography for MJ, which
Hmm.
easily deserved it. A choreographer, I'm not going to get to see what he has to say. That's
Mm.
outrageous, you know. And I understand you want to save some time, but it's still, you're giving them an hour. You're just not putting it on prime time. You know,
Well, and
it's
this is
streaming.
what I was saying in the last episode. You know, you mentioned that you need a space like Radio City Music Hall because of how many performers are going to be there, and so on. Like, you basically need the backstage
Mm-hmm.
of Radio City to put this on. But at the same time, I'm like, would it have been a savings if you just streamed it
Yeah.
on Paramount Plus, the whole thing? Because that way you could watch it whenever you want. And if they were savvy, like we said about the marketing, if they just clip all of those moments so that those moments can be shared later, that there may be a little bit more life. You know,
It's a worthy
for the show
notion you
itself.
have. Of course, I know they've had the discussions.
Yeah, and
they're not stupid. They
at the same time, I'm going to watch the Tonys every year,
right.
you know, um, because it's like one of those things. Like, you're in the business, you watch it. It's just like
It's also
you know,
usually extremely entertaining. You know, doesn't every award show has bad moments or
yeah.
less than great moments, but for the most part, the only thing I always wonder is my family who don't live in New York. They don't know these shows. They haven't even heard of the
Hmm.
new shows. So it's like, well, what if we were doing only independent film for the Oscars and none
Hmm.
of us has seen any of the films? What value does it have if I don't know what it's about?
Well, sometimes watching the Oscars is like that, especially
Correct.
when you get to the international films.
Right.
You know,
And the
how many people
documentary
here have
shorts.
even found them?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it is tough. It's like, this is a production, and it is a draw, in a way, and it, you know, we're not there for the commercials because
No.
we will get up and go refresh our drinks and get more snacks and what have
Well,
you.
don't tell me when I DVR the whole show and then wait a half an hour before I
You can skip
start it
it.
so I can skip through all the commercials when they happen. I have a
Well,
technique.
I also think it would be kind of cool if they did it online and they had an opportunity to, kind of like the live, theatrical presentations that Fox does, that NBC does, where they show you a little bit of the behind the scenes parts.
Mm-hmm.
This is how we get the cast from one soundstage to another soundstage for Grease. Like I really appreciated that
Right.
because I'm a nerd.
Right.
So
Can I talk
I
about?
would love to see more of the behind the scenes. Like there's a video online for Saturday Night Live that
Mhm.
shows you what goes on during the opening credits because they have to transition from the cold open to the monologue.
Right.
So they're doing all of that in that time, and that's why it's long. Plus, there's a large ensemble. So those are the kind of things that like maybe if we see them we would have there's a subset of the audience that might get a greater appreciation for the work, and it's also a great opportunity to celebrate the people behind the scenes who
All of that's
make all
possible.
of
It
this
is
happen.
the writers. It's CBS, which is has a very heavy hand in what they're going
Yeah,
to allow because they're not losing money, but they're not making a lot of money off the
yeah,
show.
and I know they don't want to make it sloppy. We clean up all of those things and they show us the perfect
Right.
parts
Right.
or the best
By
parts.
the way,
You know,
may I have to throw in my biggest pet peeve about the whole thing.
mhm.
And you may not remember any of this, but when the Tonys turned 50 years old, they had a song or two from every Tony Awards along the way. They brought out, so if Fiddler on the Roof was 1963, I think, or five, I don't remember. So Zero Mostel came out and did If I Were a Rich Man. Then
Mhm.
they found the time to take us through the history of the Broadway theater. And here we
Mhm.
are at the 75th after a pandemic, and they did not take us through history. Yeah, Ariana DeBose had her song, which mentioned a lot of shows. I'm sure that was their way of getting through it. Then you add to it, we lost Stephen Sondheim, and they have one slow song
Mm.
sung by Bernadette Peters as the tribute, and that's it.
Yeah,
Uh-uh.
with old footage,
No,
with
no, we
footage of
are
interviews.
nerds. We celebrate our people, our shows, and this needed to be. We just needed to be bombarded with the entertainment over the past 75 years that Broadway had to offer. Instead, it just said, "Well, we have a lot of new shows, and we're going to." And it was great that they had their numbers, and then they
Do
moved
you
on.
think do you think the tribute was short because there have been more lengthy tributes to Sondheim?
Um, no, I don't think that's the reason. I think they had 2 hours and they just said we have a lot to get done, and they came up with, well, here's one person who can
Yeah.
do it. It needed to be as special. I mean, and company was of course being celebrated, so there's a Sondheim show. I think they thought there was enough Sondheim, and they were wrong. There are
Hmm.
many ways for them, even if it wasn't singing, there are many ways for them to have made it extra special. But
Yeah.
like I said, I don't want to argue the show itself. Glenn Weiss, who co-produces and directs it, has done a brilliant job every year for a long time. So he's a class act, and no relation to me. Uh,
A
but
lot of open seats in the balcony.
there are a lot of open seats in the orchestra.
Yeah.
And because of that $250 ticket, I
Hmm.
mean, that
That
was
rush
that
ticket, that
rush
was a
ticket,
must have.
$250. How outrageous! Um,
Yeah.
that didn't bother me so much. It is it's over 5,000 seats at Radio City.
Hmm.
Uh, it's still, I agree with you. It would have been nice to do it in a Union Broadway house, and figure out something special to open a theater that is currently closed.
Hmm.
So that they didn't have to compete with the show that's in the actual theater.
Yeah.
They don't do that because it costs so much money to do that. And everything's about
Well,
money.
that's what I was, and that's also what I was saying before. If it's a if it's a show, not a showcase, but if it's an opportunity to show off a theater, one of the Broadway houses that isn't open, it's more of an intimate um, audience where you pretty much have, the companies who are nominated, and
Hmm.
some other people. I don't know the numbers of who else needs to be in the room, where it happens.
Hmm.
Who else needs to be there? And so the 5,000 seats is necessary, but it's like, let's this theater is now being turned into the Lena Horne
Right.
Theater, so we're going to do it here, or
These are all valid.
should have been at the Stephen Sondheim
Right. Exact. Thank you.
Theater.
Exactly. All, but it's closed because Mrs. Doubtfire is gone,
Yes,
and then
but
they
that's
have to
why it could have
reopen
been
it,
there.
and then they have to pay people, and
Oh yeah, yeah,
on
yeah.
and on and on. And
Four
and
walls
it's still
contract.
worth it. It's still worth it. They need to figure out what's the most exciting new news that we have to offer. I mean, it's coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah.
They did a wonderful job on so many fronts. I don't want to be negative. It's just
Hmm.
for us nerds and for us community members. I wanted so much more. Not they did anything wrong. I just they
Yeah.
could have kept going as far as I was concerned, and cleaned up a few things I didn't need to see. Yeah,
I think it would be nice for a house to plan to
yeah,
host it, you know? So they have to make sure there's a limited run in there. Like it has a must close kind of thing so that the Tony Awards can happen here. I don't know. Again,
yeah.
I don't
We don't
understand
have to
that part of it.
figure it out. They do,
Yeah.
right?
I just have ideas.
Yeah.
I'm a chatty. So,
uh,
you know,
well,
um
anyway,
okay.
yeah.
So,
I did want
yeah,
to
the Tony.
I did want to bring up one other thing.
Yes.
Um, the yesterday, yeah, yesterday was the Tonys. Um, the my union, the Association of Theatrical Press Agents and Managers, known as ATPAM,
At Pam.
um, the leadership sent out a beautiful, beautiful congratulations to the managers and press agents in the union who are working on the Tonys and who are working on all the shows that the Tonys are about. And it occurred to me that we're that's self-congratulating ourselves and saying we know we exist and we know we work 24/7 and that we work as hard as the stage managers and we work
Hmm.
as hard as anybody else on that stage, and yet we're not acknowledged. And it occurred to me that I was for a moment resentful. Now, I'm not working as a manager right now, I mean, on any of those shows,
Hmm.
but it's a shame. It's like someone had to guilt the league into saying, let's talk about swings and understudies and standbys and let's celebrate them. Well, yeah, there are a lot more people to celebrate. How about the people who are running all the computerized scenery that has to take master degrees now? You can't just know how to use a hammer. These people are experts with major degrees just to get the scenery to move. And we're not talking about backstories. There's a backstory. How do you get that set to move the way it does? How do you get those computerized lights, which are so much more advanced than they ever were when I was growing up? and that people I know off Broadway have never even seen because it's
Mm-hmm.
unique to someone who has the money and the ability to hang them. And they're all computerized. How does the lighting designer learn to do that? Right? All of that stuff, you don't have to do all of it every year, but we need to acknowledge it. So, anyway, I got that in our podcast.
Yes.
Thank you, managers, house managers,
Well,
company managers,
congratulations
and
to
press
at
agents.
Pamela's all over
Yes,
the
there
world.
you go.
You should there should be a softball team called the at
The-
Pamela's,
well, there is a softball team.
and they should play the Ann Peggies.
There is a softball
Love
league
it.
on Broadway. They play
Hmm.
every not during the pandemic, but otherwise they play every year. So
I'm imagining the Broken Hearts Club, the softball scene in the Broken Hearts Club.
see, you're talking to someone who doesn't know it.
Oh, come
I
on.
don't know it. Sorry.
Billy Porter, Zach Braff, Timothy Oliphant.
Oh, sounds like great cast. Great
Ah,
cast.
gay movie night. Put it on the calendar. Here we go. All right. So, we don't work for the Tonys and they're not sponsoring the podcast. So,
Right.
we're not going to go deep into the weeds. But you can find the winners online at tonyawards.com/winners.
And we of course have
So,
opinions, but nobody cares. So we're going to move on.
yes, no one cares what we think. No one cares. Okay.
So
So, what are we talking about
my
today?
question is for you. Let's go. It's not that far from Broadway, but let's go to
Mm-hmm.
Philadelphia. And you just started working for
91 miles.
okay, and you started working for a smaller but accomplished theater company, and you just started. So I wonder, we all have our hey, we just started a job in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
What insights do you have? What are your first reactions? Without giving
Yeah.
secrets away, it's not,
So yeah. So I have mentioned subtly here and on social media that I am now the general manager at Theater Exile, which is a great theater company in Philadelphia, who is just closed the 25th season as an organization. Um, it has been exciting and a little bit uh, nerve wracking because, on the one hand, I'm joining the organization at the end of a season, which is great. So I'm getting to see how a season closes out. Where there's a bunch of postmortems where we're figuring out what worked, what didn't, and how to move into the next season with with the experience of what went on this season. I got to go to a gala. It was very nice. It was
that's
very
always
nice.
fun.
But now it's a lot of meetings and and thinking about. So I'm often spending a lot of time understanding how the organization has operated throughout the season, so that I can identify the things that are working very well, and see how I can influence, change that would make those areas better, run efficiently. But for the most part, how the organization is operating is great. However, the organization did operate under the guise of a pandemic.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of things there that we will not be able to carry into the next season, like various funding that we were able to receive, during that. So now we have to think a little bit. Okay, now we're not going to have the support that we had while we were being sustained. We have to think about it the way we always
Without
thought about
going
it
into
before.
specifics, did you
Mm-hmm.
get an information about how that pandemic support was spent, and did you find it to be valid? Um, you're not in that situation where we're worried about misuse, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's more a matter of there has to be a
I
future. How do we move there?
Yes. I I believe for most organizations, this funding is a placeholder for if they could have fired on all cylinders, they would have had this funding
Hmm.
anyway. So let's just say that
Okay. Okay.
they would have operated like this if if they had been able to produce a season the way they had originally intended. In the case of Theater Exile had moved into a new building in 2019, in the fall of 2019. Um, was it the fall? I'm sorry, in 2019, and so this would have, but right before the pandemic. So
Wow.
now, so that's there. It's like, okay, is there something that we still have to do in here,
Hmm.
that we didn't have a chance to do because we were not in our space firing on all cylinders,
Was the theater not euphemistically but literally shut down during the pandemic? Was it like the doors closed, locked, lights turned off?
No. It's like administrative the people who would have normally occupy the administrative office were working remotely.
Okay.
I mean, the good thing for us is that we are already in a cloud solution where we operate, so we can operate remotely, and like many organizations, because there are a lot of resources that nonprofits get. Like there's a website. There are a couple of websites that identify the resources that are mostly on the tech side that allow organizations to function properly, particularly nonprofits. So we have taken advantage of a lot of those things we'd already had in place. So those things kept us organized, gave us the ability to communicate and, stay on track. But the things that we were not necessarily able to do is, rent our space, as much as we would like to, and occupy our space as much as we would like to, or operate at full capacity.
Right.
So those are the things that were adjustments that, as we progress forward, we are I feel like everyone is thinking about, like, okay, so we adjusted capacity for safety reasons. Do we keep that? Do we, go back to our general capacity?
Hmm.
Will an audience return? So those are the things that we're thinking of. Also, we are uh, planning an announcement to our season.
Excellent.
So,
Excellent.
and that stuff is still very much in the works, finishing touches. Um and it's kind of
How
like,
large is staff?
so we have, I've I think it's like
Okay.
10 or so. That would be considered like the main
Mm-hmm.
admin staff. But then when you get into production, we have more
Sure.
people, working with us, per production. Um, so a lot of it really is just, how do we keep things organized? How do we make sure that everything is still, operating the way it needs to operate? And if the good thing about the summer is that we have sort of an opportunity to just sort of, you know, it's not spring cleaning
Mm-hmm.
when you think about it from a nonprofit's point of view, I guess, unless you are an organization that also programs in the summer. I'm looking at the summer as like the spring cleaning sort of opportunity,
Right.
whereas it's not that our place is a mess and we need to clean it up. But that's the opportunity to kind of, we don't have a main stage production to focus on, so we can think about those other things, at this point.
It's interesting you bring this up when it's the downtime, and there are
Mm-hmm.
many theaters that are afraid to have downtime. There are others, as you said, that are summer theaters. Some are year round, but the summer is the worst time to bring the audience in. Every community is slightly different where your audience is
Yeah.
different. When I started at Barrington Stage many, many moons ago, so it was a different theater company up there. They were basically a summer theater
Mm-hmm.
because that's where they had a lot of New Yorkers and Connecticut people who had summer homes up in that area of the Berkshires. They have since become year round, and that was part of what their goal was. But initially, when I started there, it was January. And of course, lots of snow and cold in Massachusetts. Um, it was fascinating in how much work, even if we'd been year round, the administrative work would have been just as much
Mm.
as just going for the summer. Because
Yeah.
if anything, you kind of feel like, okay, I can worry about whether or not we have to fix a wall in the building
Hmm.
when I might have actually been worried about the current production instead if we had been doing a show. And I'd still have to fix the wall, right? So it's kind of a mixed blessing, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because sometimes the planning is, well, do I cast the show now and then lose the actors later? Do we do this?
Mm-hmm.
That's when you have planning time. So
Yeah.
it's a hard situation. That's how I saw it. I mean, I came in there and it was just too easy at first because we have
Yeah.
time.
And through our experience with the readings, that it sometimes appears that equity isn't
Hmm.
firing on all cylinders.
Sometimes.
I'm being generous,
Yeah. See, and I'm a fan
s-
of equity, and I have to admit what you're saying.
yeah.
you know,
Yeah, so it's all of those things too. So it's paying attention to, are there going to be changes to the rule book?
right?
Do we need to keep an eye on that? You know, so that we are prepared, so that we don't get thrown for a loop.
And they're going to throw you for a
You
loop
know,
anyway. Especially
yeah,
coming out of a
and
pandemic, things are changing all the time, and they have new staff, and the new staff doesn't
yeah.
have the history to understand why some of the old rules were there.
Hmm.
So some of them seem to be making it up as they go along.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing. Well, that's one of the things that I have encountered here. Um,
Hmm.
we've had there are things that we used to do because of people who occupied the positions in the past, and not that those things were either right or wrong, but they were things that we were doing when we had these other people. But we haven't if we now I'm looking through these items and saying like, oh, we were doing this because so and so, when they were with us, were doing it this way. So I've been asking a lot of questions like, um, so just for clarity, why are we handling this way? Not to say that it's wrong or anything, but just trying to understand, because I also want to know, like, if they've just been dealing with the way things are because you know this vehicle is moving,
Mm-hmm.
you know and so now we have this opportunity to say, well, we were only doing that because there was a change that was unexpected, and so we all just sort of rallied together, and then that became so and so's responsibility, but it's not really their responsibility. And so we need to make sure that the right people are doing the right thing.
May I
And
suggest to you your position as managing director? Um, I when
general manager.
So I apologize. I already gave you a raise, uh, although you're doing the same work.
I would accept the raise. Thank you.
um, the leadership responsibility is,
Hmm.
we go into theater with a collaborative mind. We're working together. Let's see what the people have been there before, what they've been doing, so I don't disrupt their process. And until you realize that when there hasn't been someone in your position prior, or if that person was perhaps not as much a leader as you can
Hmm.
be, that
Yeah.
that these staff members, many of which at my age I call them kids, they need mentorship, and they are,
Mm.
it's they don't even know why they're doing half the things they're doing. They were told this is the way we do posters, or this is the way we send out social media, or this is the reason we charge X amount at the box office. And the truth is,
Yeah.
a leader can come in and say, I have a reason that we should do it this way. And let me teach you how you can make that happen, or work with me or with each other to make it happen. It becomes a mentorship,
Hmm.
and to me, that is, I didn't believe it when I was first doing it, but I think that's as much of the position um, as just making sure everything's, moving along. That is a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
tricky thing to admit to yourself. Like, you're supposed to teach them the way towards success at that institution.
Well, one thing I do find interesting, and I would be curious to know if other um, organizations have felt the same way. It's like, because you're not working in the office as frequently as you
Mhm.
were pre-pandemic, I never understand how an office gets in a state of disarray. It's like, it almost seems like, on the day that we had decided that we would not be here as frequent, that we would clean the
That's
house so that we hardly have anything out of sorts.
right.
And you know I think about it all the time, only because I guess I would be considered a bit of a neat freak, but I don't
No,
think
you're not.
so. I
You're
mean,
not a neat. Darnell, I know you well
I'm
enough.
just I'm
You're
just
you have
organized.
pride. That's all that is. That's
Yeah.
not being. You're not OCD. You're not a neat freak. You have pride, and and this is part of what I'm talking about. This is not running theater per se, but it is. It
Hmm.
matters. People walk into a theater or they walk into an office. I cannot tell you how many job interviews I went into, and when they stuck us literally in a large closet with three chairs to meet with the executive director and the artistic
Mm.
director to have an interview, because the other
Yeah.
offices, they weren't even talking to each other. They were in,
Yep.
and it had never been vacuumed. The
Hmm.
dust was everywhere. Why do I want to work there?
I did a podcast interview with an artistic director. His office his office looked like it was in kind of like it was a throughway. I mean, it is an office, but it looks like it should be an old janitor's closet.
Mhm.
And I was like, I said, you need to ask your board for a better office. Like, this is, I mean, you get work done here, that's
Right.
great. But I'm particular about those things. Especially like, if you're in a new theater, but you have refurbished technology
Hmm.
and it's very visible, like, what does that say about you? There's sort of a visual there. I look at those things and I know that that's kind of superficial, but it kind of says something like, if you're not organized, if I look in your office and I don't see it as being very organized, I'm going to assume that the organization isn't very
Hmm.
organized. So those are the things that I definitely want us to be aware of all the time, and I'm sure that they were always aware of that. But yes, I mean, like, um, there is a part of me that I guess I would feel a little bit Um, I'm just gonna say it like you knew company was coming over, you know,
Right,
so
right.
clean up clean up your house. But
But someone
they
has to be
may
assigned, and that's again part of the
yes.
leadership. I will tell you, and one of the things I'm concerned about, not you specifically, by the way, but just
Mhm.
about the remote working. That
Yeah.
I do know, and I firmly believe this. It's a style of management. Different people have different
Mhm.
styles, but the best the best management admin working environments where I could overhear everyone's phone conversations. I was in the room with them because not all information can, after you have a meeting and, like you said, you come up with the new season, and we've decided, but on this one show, we're going to have this special thing and we're going to run 4.5 weeks instead of 4 weeks. Well, you have to remember to put that in writing, send it out to everyone. They have to read it. Then they have to interpret how that's going to go out. And there are people who aren't as trained as you are. But
Mm.
if they overhear the conversation and they know they're supposed to, then you want people who know how to ask questions. And those are the people you want in the room with you. Because they'll say, wait a minute, I heard you say to so and so, is there something I should know? Or are we about to postpone one of the shows? Oh, good, you're not. That was just a scary conversation over her. That only,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I get it. The remote, we went through the pandemic, um, but it really was effective. We do it on Broadway. The general managers with the company managers with the office workers, everyone hears each other.
Yes.
And the smaller the office, which is why,
But there
it,
but there are things you can do with the technology that create a constant connection if you choose to do that. For example, um, you know, I love how the platforms are integrated as such. Like I'm working on a document and I have a question for someone that inside of the document I'm working
mm-hmm,
on, I can write a comment that pings one of my
right.
coworkers. And I can just, put an at symbol and type them in and get them right in here. I can also queue up a video chat
Mm-hmm.
inside of the document and we can collaborate on the document in real time. There are things like depending on the makeup of your office, you could set up a terminal that is live in your office, so that your remote workers can see what's going on in the office, for those periods of time.
Again,
And
training, because
yes.
it has nothing to do with age. I mean, I've used a
Hmm.
number of the things you've said, and I'm old, right? So
Yeah.
it has to do with, though, if you get someone right out of college, and I'm telling you, I'm working with three of them, they would
Hmm.
not know how to do what you just said. And they're right out of college, and they are not tech idiots. They just don't know
Well,
how to apply
this
that.
isn't. Yeah. Okay. So I worked at the Philadelphia Museum of
Mm-hmm.
Art, right? Once upon a time. Um, before we even before we even before we even started doing our general jobs responsibility, we spent 3 days in the building, but kind of off
Mm-hmm.
site. We were not on the floor per se, but we spent 3 days in the building understanding the history of the organization, how the organization operates, and what to
Right.
expect before we got out there. And not just at the PMA, but similar jobs I've had over time have done that. Like we even have there was one organization I worked for where we went through it was a 3 week training. It was a 3 week history training because we were a historical education organization. Everyone our primary staff who was seasonal went through this 3-week training where they learned the history of not just why we exist, but like the foundation of what we offer as an organization was like a 3-week
Hmm.
course that we took. So some organizations do a great job at this, but yes, you can't just tell somebody they start tomorrow and throw them to the weeds like a lot of places where they need bodies
Correct.
to fill roles. Like you have to give people time to understand your history. Like, you know, the I have an understanding of how this organization works because over the years I've had many conversations about the work they bring to the stage, but that is not the administrative foundation of the
Hmm.
organization. I still need to understand how the organization operates, you know. So I just kind of walk in knowing that I have to do that. It doesn't matter what kind of skills I bring. I'm going to need time to understand how you handle
Right.
things, like what time you come in, what you do, and who gets what, who's responsible for doing various things before I can kind of attach,
And you but
what I
and
brought
you
to the
don't
organization.
you often have to do that at the same time as you're running current stuff. It's not like you sitting around.
Yes.
I
Mm-hmm.
as I think I've told you at Barrington Stage, my first day on the job, we started a workshop for Putnam County Spelling Bee, which eventually went to Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
It started my first day. I had not set up the contracts for all the actors or
Mm-hmm.
for anybody working on the show, but we had our first rehearsal and everything had to have been in place. On a Broadway
Mm-hmm.
show, the managers hired sometimes 1 week before the first rehearsal, and everyone has to be put on payroll in 3 days, and no one's on site yet. You just learn to jump in and work 24/7. But along with that, you must meet the key people who have the history of where did the show come from or where did the organization come from? What does it mean? What
Yeah.
are we trying to do? What are you got to collect all of this and be brilliant. And
When I was
but I was just going to add,
when
your staff deserves that also, even if they're only
yes.
making $200 a week, right?
Yeah. When I was 25, I was hired as a production
Mm-hmm.
manager, right? And in the same historical education, we call it edutainment organization. Um, I was about to sit down for that 3-week training, and I was pulled out by my director, who basically told me, "You have to spin up a guest services department that goes live in 3 weeks." They didn't have anything.
Wow.
How are we going to sell tickets? We need merchant services. We need job, yeah, job postings, everything. And I was a little overwhelmed at first, but then I thought about it. I was like, I've done these in various roles. I didn't expect to spin one up from scratch, but I did.
Yeah.
And but I did have time. I had a few weeks,
It's
and it was my focus. It was like, you're not going to go to this training. You're going to be over here spinning up a guest
But
services department.
here's the bottom line. This has to do with hiring. And I'm not going to use the term HR, which drives me crazy because we're in the theater, even though there are plenty
Mm-hmm.
of HR departments these days. There were not in my day. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Hiring is about finding people who are resourceful, not necessarily someone who's already had the experience. Someone
Yes.
who's got a brain and understands the concept of putting a show together and the other stuff, and it knows how to ask questions, right? And so my question often in an interview to somebody would be, uh, okay, I need a yellow highlighter for the director, and it's now 10 p.m. at night, so the stores are closed. We are in a suburban setting. Go. What do you do? Now, of course, there's no exact town and we don't know all this stuff. It's not a test like you're going to fail.
Do I have an expense
Well,
account?
even if you do, where are you going? Where are you
I
going?
know.
And it's not that there's a correct answer.
I'm Amazoning everything. It'll be here in 2 days.
And see, and I'm going to say, and you don't have Amazon, and you don't have 2 days
Mm.
because the director needs it right then.
Okay, I'm going to go for a walk and I'll be
There you
back in 20
go.
minutes.
That works. That works.
Well, you do need to step away and make a
That's right.
plan. Yes, yes,
Absolutely.
yeah,
And like I said, there's not a wrong or right single answer. It's, can this person think on their feet and come up with some answer that might work, and how
yeah.
flustered do they get? And
Well, it is a talk less, smile more situation.
oh, I
Uh,
love the
I do
entertainment
spend a lot of
value of
time.
your
I do spend a
podcast.
lot of
Yeah.
time just listening, and it is the most valuable lesson I've ever picked up.
Mm-hmm.
To just sit back and listen to how things are going, like how people talk, their cadence, like what everybody is saying. Because often when I sit in a meeting, I hear a bunch of ideas back and forth. And then ultimately, when someone comes to me and says, "What do you think?" and then I'm ultimately combining everything I heard from everyone else and saying, "Well, it sounds like everybody wants to do this, so
Mm-hmm.
this seems like it could function this way," or like, I had several conversations where it became clear that we have a weak link.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, that link is weak. So the first thought is, let's get rid of the link. You are the weakest link.
Yeah.
Goodbye. No. Or we have to assess, is there a way to strengthen this link? So
And do you have the
so now we've
time and the personnel to spend on that link?
yes. Well, we're thinking, I mean, well, it's clear that on one side of this fence we're seeing that the link is
Mm-hmm.
weak, but we haven't necessarily heard anything from the other side of the fence. So the other side of the fence might say, well, we're accustomed to getting a certain amount of information, in
Mm-hmm.
advance. And it allows us to go back and really put this together and really craft a great resolution for you, solution for you. And if we find that, it's going to be like, okay, so instead of like, sorry, we're 2 weeks behind, we're going to be 2 weeks ahead, so we can strengthen this
Mm-hmm.
link. So those are the kind of things, like, you have to have time to do an assessment, like the mindset of, you know I walk into every space with a mindset of, it's not that deep. It's not that deep. Even though there's nuance, it's not necessarily that
Mm-hmm.
deep. So when I think about it like that, I also say, because I come from the tech side, I'm like, how do I make this easier? Okay, right now you're dealing with a lot of paperwork. How do we simplify that to minimize the paperwork, or get rid of the
Interesting,
paperwork?
though. I'm going to interrupt you just a second because I come at it, and a lot of it, as you said, it's a background. And I come at it
Mm-hmm.
for, how do I make this more human? Because I find that more people respond when, not in all situations. I don't mean, I'm not writing off tech at all. It's essential.
Mm-hmm.
But most people respond initially to the human connection. And if I
Yeah.
can say, guess what? Sit down at the chair here, let's talk this through, versus let me find a way, making something up, to a new program for us to use. Both are valid, both are needed. But step one, it's easier for me to immediately use the communication skills on a human basis than it is to say, we're now going to learn a new program or how to use this correctly. You
Yeah.
have to do both. Don't get
Well,
me wrong, you do both.
that's definitely something I've learned as well. Um, I worked for an organization that went kicking and screaming into the
Mm-hmm.
future with their
Yeah.
technology, and so I know that there is a
Mm-hmm.
balance. So yes, I'm not. I don't walk into a situation saying, "Oh, you're all PC, we're
Yeah,
moving to Mac."
right.
I'm not doing that at all. Um, I want to know, what is your existing platform? What are you working on now? Okay, then I need to do a deeper dive so that I can understand how you're using this now and whether there are other features. Now, what I have found that's interesting about, the position I'm in right now is that the the platform that they're working in at this
Mhm.
moment has just received some recent updates that we haven't had time to incorporate. So I'm getting in at a great
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
to say, hey, did you know the system could do this? Because if we do this, it will make it so much
Hmm.
easier to get access to
Hmm.
this, or we can do these things. So, we're learning
Yeah.
together. So it's not necessarily that I came in with brilliant ideas. It's that these things became available to us at the time, and I'm willing to, you know, dive deeper into this to have the understanding that I can share with the rest of the team to see how things work. Like, it's a simple thing. Yeah, everybody has their own sort of lists. How do you make sure you let everybody know? Oh, well, I've got my own kind of distribution list I have together, and I'm like, well, the organization should have one. If the organization doesn't have one, I'm going to
There you
create one.
go. There you go.
Everybody can use it,
So,
things like
well,
that.
I think we've gone a whole bunch of places today, but um, yeah, I think this is a worthy discussion. We're the business of theater, right?
Mm-hmm.
A
Yeah.
working title. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think there are many smaller theaters that a lot of people are trying to understand and deal with. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Compared to a Roundabout Theater in New York or Manhattan Theater Club that just won the Tony, bringing it back to that, for
Mm-hmm.
both Clyde's and Take Me Out. What does that mean? How do those organizations work? If you forgive me, one last thought. I spoke with someone working at a major theater company here in New York who has been there on the crew for now 3 months and has never met any of the leading administrators, managers, producers of that theater company. That to me is
That's
bad, bad, bad
called
leadership.
a
Yeah.
bureaucracy.
And that's where perhaps it's gotten too large. Not that these things are ever going to go away, but
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you, and I this is perhaps I didn't understand it at the time. When I first started working at the New York Shakespeare Festival, I was hired by an audience development director to join their department, and she said, "We'd love you to work here. Great, you can start in 2 days." I said, "Great." So that's it. I'm done. I'm ready. No, you're actually not officially hired until you meet producer Joseph Papp. I said, huh?
Mm.
I mean, now this is an organization of 600 staff members. I'm going to meet
Mm.
this big wig running chorus line and for colored girls and I was required the next day to go into his office, shook his hand, sat down. It was 5 minutes. He asked me a question or two. I made a joke with him, nervous as all hell. But I walked out
Mm-hmm.
of there. He knew my name. He welcomed me to the organization. It wasn't an interview. He just said,
Yeah,
"You need
you're
to
right.
know I'm here. I'm the boss. You can come to me with a question. I'm glad you're working in that department. This is perhaps what I hope you'll be able to do." And
Mm-hmm.
welcome. And that meant everything, everything to me. So,
Welcome to the
welcome to
public.
the public.
Now go to the wood.
Anyway, on that line,
Yes.
I think we should end it for today. So there.
Sure.
Why
Why not?
not?
This has been The Business of Theater, a working title. I'm Darnell
Mitch
Radford,
Rice.
and we'll see you at the theater. Thank you for listening. Tune in next time for another episode of The Business of Theater, a working title, with Darnell Radford and Mitch Weiss. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Share the podcast with a friend, colleague, or give us some social media love. This podcast is an Emory production. Visit us online at em3ry.com/TBOT. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at em3ryotm.